back to the Bring Your Own Book Club. All the fun of a book club, none of the homework. Today, we're back with my best friend and resident genius, Miranda Butler.
What an introduction. Thanks, Jill.
I am so excited to talk to you about what we've been reading.
hmm
Um, but you are my guest, and I shall ask you first. Hey, what have you been reading lately?
All right. Well, I'm always reading all kinds of things, but the book I've brought today is called A Cup of Water Under My Bed, and it is a memoir by Daisy Hernandez, and it is very well written and beautiful. And I really wanted to do it last time we met, but I hadn't finished it yet. So I'm excited to do it this time.
I'm excited to hear about it. All right, well, last time you came to me, you talked about a series you were reading, and so I thought it only fair to come back and talk to you about a series that I've read.
Ooh,
I have read the Imperial Radch series by Ann Leckie, which consists of three main novels. There are two ancillary novels. That's an unintended joke, but and then a couple short stories. I've read one of the short stories in all three of the main novels. So those are Ancillary Justice, Ancillary Sword, and Ancillary Mercy. And the short story I read is called Night's Slow Poison. And I read this one on audiobook. It was narrated by Adjoa Ando, and she was so good. There were so many voices and accents and many things to keep track of, and she handled it all so well that I sometimes wondered if there was a full cast.
wow.
And you would know her from a variety of things. She was Lady Dunbury in Bridgerton. I don't watch that, so I'm sorry if I mispronounced it. She was in Invictus, Fractured, Broadchurch. She's done lots of stuff in the Doctor Who universe, narrations and podcasts and audiobooks, but most notably, she played Francine Jones, who's Martha Jones' mom.
Oh, I also just looked up pictures of her from Bridgerton, and I absolutely know her. She's a phenomenal actress. I just did not know her name.
She is so good, and I am awed about it. And I'll get into it a little bit, but there were some melodies that were necessary in this book. If you were reading it, you'd have to make a like reading it in print. You'd have
hmm
to make them up yourself. But as she was reading them, she did a really excellent job of not reusing melodies that already exist, which is hard given the
hmm
amount of melodies that there are. Um, so yeah, what would you say generally your book is about? And tell me about the author, genre, any of that. You got into it a little, but
Yeah,
expand.
so it's I guess technically a coming of age memoir. And it's really I think interesting to both of us because the woman who wrote it is a writer. And obviously, I guess anyone who writes memoirs is a writer. But what I mean by that is like, like a public figure might write a memoir, or like
Hmm.
a person of some fame might write a memoir. And this is a book about a writer becoming a writer and writing. And I think that that's very, to me, appealing in a memoir because memoir is not a genre I read a lot.
Hmm.
Um, I have no problem with memoir. I just think I am such a wacky creative person that I like to escape into kind of fictitious worlds.
Hmm.
But this one was really, I think, poetic in the way that she wrote it. And I guess the really, really short version of it is that she is a child of immigrants, one parent from Cuba and one parent from Colombia. And she is writing about her experience with language. And when she's younger, she resents being a kind of second language English speaker because she feels like behind her classmates and she feels like different and stuff. And so then as she goes through and grows up, she comes to appreciate more like her native language and her parents' culture. And I think I probably relate to this book a lot because the big kind of crux is her going to graduate school. And what happens, the title is A Cup of Water Under My Bed, and her parents practice some, or her dad specifically practices some like Santeria and like these. I'm not a religious studies scholar, but these religions that come from like colonization and mixing of cultures and things. And she doesn't know that that's like a whole tradition with a whole history and a fraught history and like things that academics talk about for hours and hours. And she goes to graduate school and she sees like this tradition that her dad has, that she always thought was like wacky and idiosyncratic, and it's in like an academic textbook and people are exploring it and talking about it. And so I think I really love seeing her feel like academia was helpful, which it
Oh,
certainly can be, but it can also be
yeah.
traumatic and difficult. And then sidebar, she's also a bi woman, and she writes about that, and I think that's also a really important topic for people from um, immigrant backgrounds to feel comfortable sharing their story about, because her family is not very accepting, and it's specific to like the conflict between her American culture and her Latin American culture, where her American culture is accepting and her other culture is not, and you know that kind of push and pull. So yeah, that's I guess a brief summary or intro to it.
That is really interesting. Also, apologize to both you and our listeners if you hear my dog gently snoring in the background. It's a cozy podcast, so just imagine you have a cozy dog near you.
A cozy dog has joined us.
Um, but that's a really interesting concept for a memoir, and it is just because I know you, it's definitely not the thing I've heard you talk about before. So I'm very curious how you came to know about this author and this book and like what drew you to it.
Yeah, so actually I got my new teaching job, and
Ooh.
the old teaching job did not require what we might call in teaching a single author text. So that can be, you know, anything. My old teaching job, and there's a whole boring discussion we could have. But teachers disagree, like freshman comp specifically, when you're learning to write, about how much reading you should assign or what kind of reading you should assign, because you and I probably both know that to be a successful writer, you should read, you
hmm
know?
But you should
Um,
also
uh,
choose what you read, which is why we're doing this podcast. So I get the
exactly.
debate.
Exactly. So it's like, but yeah, you should also read something relevant to you, and you should read something that you want to read, and you should read something that maybe the genre is somehow going to assist you in your specific task that you're doing or learning about. And so it's a whole a kind of uh, sorry, I just don't have good words today, and I usually have better words.
It's
It's just
okay.
complicated. It's
Yeah, it's
complicated.
a source of debate, I think.
Yes, there you go. It's a source of debate. But I had not been including a like a book. Obviously, you read essays and stuff in a class. And so it'd been many years, and I was like, well, I have these old lesson plans with other books. One book I've used is Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. Another book I've done is called Losing Earth, which is older now, but it's about climate change. And so I was like, I want a new book. I want it to be I want it to be Latin American, and I want it to be a woman. The reason for that is obviously because I love women. I mean, I guess that's true. But because I felt that that would be more relatable to me, and I'm assuming maybe you know, but we also want the book to be relevant to the students. And the college I'm teaching at is a Hispanic serving institution. So a lot of students may relate to the author's background. And then also, generally speaking, especially at like a junior or 2 year college, most of the students are actually women than men, which is very interesting. And so I was like, how can I find a book that may be easier to relate to? Also, the specific college I'm teaching at it's near Santa Cruz. It's a commute for me. It's not where I live exactly, but it's a very gay place. And I was like, yes, what a great place to be. And so I was kind of looking for something intersectional that would have a lot of relatability. And I Googled around. I found this book. I found other books as well. And so I read a couple of books and was like, this is like the best written book I've read in a long time. And
That's
yeah, you
awesome.
are right that usually I don't read this genre very much, but I was like, even though I kind of read this looking for something to teach, I am so glad I read it. And I would recommend it even outside of an academic context. Like you could give this book to your mom and she would love it. Like it's really cool that that's the kind of book that it is, you know.
Yeah, that's really interesting. All right, I'll tell you a little bit about my series slash book and how I found it. As I said, it's the Imperial Radch series, Radch. I found it because I had a couple friends who were reading it and suddenly talking all about it. And then I saw it in my recommended list on Goodreads and Audible and Libro FM. And I was like, someone really wants me to read this. And, I read the summary, but I don't know why summaries of books don't stick in my head. Like I can read
Mm-mm.
them and they'll just like instantly leave my brain. So I just went to my friends and were like, tell me about why I should read this. Why is everyone telling me to read this? And they're like, it's a space opera. And I was like, it's a book. How is it a space opera? It's
Oh, you don't know about space opera, Jillian. What a great
well, like
opportunity.
I know about the concept of space opera, but I've seen it in like movies. I've seen, adaptations of things. I've never seen it only written.
Okay, sure.
I've thought of opera as like a musical performance.
Yeah.
And some of my friends are non-binary and were feeling very seen by this book. And so I was like, okay, I'll jump in. And then I got into the idea initially that there's sentient AI ships, basically. And I was like, okay, so kind of like Battlestar Galactica. And I love Battlestar Galactica, so that was enough to get me into it. Upon
Huh.
reading it, I realized it was almost nothing like Battlestar Galactica, and I loved it. And it's one of the most thought-provoking, intense reframings of philosophy and humanity that I have ever read.
Wow.
The basic premise, and this is basically all I can say about the basic premise without it becoming a
Hmm.
dissertation on its own, is a remnant of an imperial warship goes to war with its own interplanetary tyrant.
Wow.
Yeah, it's so good. So it has that Battlestar Galactica thing of like sentient AI and ships and space, and that's very cool. But it's not like each being is distinct in that way. Like,
Mm.
imagine if the various parts of your body all had their own sentience, but were still you. So, like, your arm can think and it knows it's part of you, but it also can decide, I want to reach for that thing and communicate that to your brain, not through just nerve synapses and stuff, but actually through a thought and an exchange of idea within the self.
Mm. Hmm.
What I will call inciting incident occurs, in which case every element of this ship called Justice of Torin um, is destroyed except for this one ancillary. Adjoa Ando is British, so I might switch back and forth between ancillary and ancillary because she said
That's okay.
ancillary.
I didn't even notice. That's just how many British things I watch.
And how used to talking to me you are. Um,
Yes.
but so all that is left of this ship, Justice of Torin, is something called an ancillary.
Hmm.
And ancillaries are a dark concept because instead of being wholly created robots with very advanced AI, They are the bodies of troublesome colonized people
Whew,
who have had their minds overwritten by the
my
AI.
body just shut down at the thought of that.
Yes. And so within that, there's this tension of like how much of the old self does the ancillary remember? And there's a lot of intense tension there. But the first book is called Ancillary Justice because it's the only remaining ancillary of Justice of Torn, and Justice is the class of ship.
Yes. I'm
It's
sorry. I don't know if you heard my sweet Bella just do a little tiny chirp. If you did,
oh,
she has joined the cozy day.
I am so thrilled. I'm always thrilled when Bella joins.
But that's why I smiled brightly. It was not about the colonization of people. But
Understood.
I'm enraptured in your summary. I truly am. I will have to tell Joshua, my fantastic partner, about this because he's a professor of like his expertise is like literature of like colonialism, specifically like Latin American countries. And like there's going to be so much that he would be so smart to talk about.
Oh my God, I would love to talk to him about this book. It's so up his alley because the divides are so fascinating and unique in a way that is deeper than a lot of these interplanetary type narratives like Star Wars and Battlestar Galactica and all these other things. It does have certain things in common where race is not really the source of division because
Mm-hmm.
when you get beyond one world, there's
Right.
so much more. But there are still very distinct forms of racism and prejudice that feel very real in the way that they are discussed in this novel or series of novels. And it's not this utopian future where everyone is free of prejudice and bigotry. There's a lot of bigotry, but it's not how you'd expect. So there's like, I'd say four main categories of beings, which is humans slash citizens, humans slash non-citizens, significant non-human species, and non-human creatures. So humans are human citizens are places that have been colonized by the Radch, that's the colonizing empire, the source, or are already citizens thereof. And when introducing them, you would call them citizen. So that's your honorific. Um, Humans, non citizens are enemies or targets. They're places to be colonized. They are outliers and they don't really, how do I say it? Unless I read something wrong, which might have happened because it's a very complex book, I don't believe they have an honorific. If they do have an honorific and are for some reason being tolerated within the imperial space, they would be introduced as honored. So if you weren't a citizen, you'd be honored Miranda. But if you were a citizen, you'd be citizen Miranda.
Mm-hmm.
Significant non-human species are essentially aliens, other non-human species that have their own worlds and colonies and technologies, and for some reason or another could not be colonized by the Radch, which is a very fun time to read about. And then there are non-human species, which are these AIs, the ancillaries, uh, and animals, fish, dogs, whatever. And it's interesting that our main perspective in this novel is through a non-human species that is really considered no more than a dog.
Yeah.
And because I'm going to say she, because I'll get into that, because she is the only remnant of this justice ship, she has the appearance of a citizen. She speaks the Imperial language. She doesn't have a larger ship body that she reports to anymore. And she has somehow, which you'll read how in the book, gained the ability to turn on this tyrant. And as you read the book, you learn more about the tyrant. And the tyrant is, bear with me, the name of the
Okay.
tyrant is Anna and she has a seemingly endless amount of bodies. They don't appear to be ancillary bodies. They seem to be clones or volunteers. It's not fully explored, but raised from babies and from a young, like, incubation period, given her brain. So we don't know the exact mechanism of that because it's not important to our character. It's just like a given. So the tyrant has had a split. Years before this book begins, um, the tyrant committed a major genocide. There was a system of planets that was refusing to submit to her will, and so she vaporized them. Like none of the planets are inhabitable. And it's even really controversial within the Empire space. There's not really a way to spin it other than this did happen a long time ago, and also it was a necessary evil and we never did it again. It's sort of treated like dropping the atomic bomb. Like no one
Exactly what I
argues,
thought.
yeah, like no one argues that it was a good thing for humanity to have done.
Hmm.
But it's far enough in the past when they are looking at it that it's just part of the landscape of history. There's nothing anyone can do about it. So later, the tyrant signs a treaty with the non-human species because they're essentially they have the ability to outgun them, and so she agrees not to colonize them. At that point, that causes a split in the tyrant's minds, and some portion of her, unknown the percentages, begin to work toward reform and ending colonization, and the other side doubles down and it's like, well, why would we vaporize an entire planetary system if we can't justify doing that to every other system? Our goal is to protect this thing that the Empire protects,
Hmm.
and either what we did before was justifiable or it wasn't justifiable. And she is the tyrant having a war with herself about that. And in the process, because of that conflict, our hero, the Justice of Torin, is able to divorce herself from either of them. She decides, yes, my primary directive is to honor the tyrant, but given the inability to do that, I will do my secondary directive, which is to protect my people.
Hmm.
And it's a very interesting book, and it really roped me in because it was so different.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm making a face, but I have so many thoughts and questions and I've
Ask
written
away.
some of them down. Um, so I guess the closest thing to what you just mentioned was like the kind of one thing being many things
Hmm.
cognitively.
Hmm.
Um, I'm wondering if or how that compares to like, those like mushroom or fungus colonies that are like all one entity, but they're little mushrooms, or like
Yeah,
that type of tree. There's like a type of tree that's like all one entity. Like, is it anything like that, or is it kind of its own different thing?
I think that's a really good explanation, actually. Um, I think the best way or the best example from the story I can use to illustrate it is our main character, this ancillary, who eventually goes by the name Breck, Breq. She is a soldier on the ship that she is. So on Justice of Torin, this ancillary has a role. And that role is to serve a captain. And we know that this ancillary is different because she sings to herself. She picks up songs of all the places she's been docked or been over the years, and without really realizing it, she sings to herself. The main ship knows she does this, all the people around know she does this, and the captain knows she does this, but the other versions of her don't, but she's still her. Like she's still one with the ship. She just has this other expression.
Yes. See, so that's my other follow-up question, which is like, how does this compare to Dollhouse, the TV show? Like, it has like a kind of echo feeling. I mean, in the character of, right? Like,
Yeah, I would say that that is one of the central mysteries of the book is how much of the before is there.
mm-hmm.
Our ancillary says that as soon as you become an ancillary, your old self dies.
That's what they want you to think, Jillian.
But she experiences that, and she experiences it as a death.
Mm-hmm.
However, we meet other characters that we would not consider it so cut and dry, where it means more that you can never go back to being who you were again, even if you remember. And so it's very complex, and I don't want to spoil how much memory ancillaries
Sure.
have, or even
Yeah.
how important it is whether or not they have those memories. It's simply not spoken about in broad terms in the book, not in a way that the author couldn't grasp it, but more in a way that it was painful for the character to consider or talk about, so they just completely shut that part of their brain down.
Yeah. So, I mean, in that way, it's a metaphor for the impossibility of decolonization. One might say that you can't just go back to how things were at any
Yes.
time. Oh, that's so cool. And then you had mentioned, I think you put a pin in it for later, that there's something gender happening, like with the she. You were like, I'll say she, but
Yes. Okay. So I'm so glad you caught on to this. This is probably my favorite part of the book is that the imperial language and the imperial culture does not care about gender. It just doesn't. The default pronoun is she.
oh, what a world.
It's really great. So everyone is she, not just captain, not just the tyrant, not just anyone. Um, because Breck was a ship, Breck was Justice of Torin. Um, she has been around for thousands of years and has picked up or had, uploaded many languages. And this is one of my favorite things. This book has a very strong sense of me as a reader reading a translation. It's as if someone took writings they found and translated them for us.
Mhm.
It's not like old writing, like it doesn't feel archaic and it's not presented as if it was old papers. It just has the feel in the language that something has been translated for us. So when Breck is on other worlds or conversing with other groups in their own languages, you do get pronouns sometimes. But you
Mhm.
spend most of the first book thinking of her maybe friend, maybe love interest as a fellow she, and then you find out later that in certain languages the pronoun would be he when there are bigender pronouns.
Mhm.
Um, that said, it's mentioned once in the first book and then never again.
As you do.
So it's like if you didn't read the first book, you would have just read the other books and thought everyone was a woman. And like again, there are some characters that you do find out would have a male pronoun in other languages, but the vast majority of characters you never find out, and it also doesn't matter.
Does it not matter because embodiment is different? Does it
Yeah,
not matter because society is different? Like what's the all of the above?
society is different. Gender doesn't dictate anything about power in this universe. The tyrant is referred to as a she, but definitely does also have male bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So it just doesn't really matter. And it also is freeing. So we go to this one world that is essentially colonized for the production of tea. And the person who runs that world, I picture as a woman, but would absolutely, it would be fine if it was like brought to life and cast as a man. Like it just doesn't matter to me. And it doesn't really affect the story because sexuality and gender have no bearing on power dynamics, which is really the only reason it matters in our world now, right? So,
I know. I'm just, yeah, I'm working through what this must look like. And I think the answer is one must read it to know what it would look like.
yeah, it's
Um,
like you don't have as much time to process that aspect of it because there are so many nuances in this world that you should be paying attention to, so you just accept it,
yeah.
which
Well, I
I
mean,
really love.
you have to, and that's a thing with science fiction, that people you either love or hate it.
Hmm.
An actual defining characteristic of science fiction is that you pretty much get dropped in
Hmm.
without like a deep, thorough explanation. You enter into a world, and a good writer will provide insight into how the world functions and the lore of the world and stuff. But you just start, and you're diving in, and you're gonna have to do a lot of critical thinking to figure out like what this world looks like, and what these, like, they'll use all these proper nouns right away that you've no idea, is that a planet, is that a colony, is that a country, like I don't know. And a lot of people dislike that about science fiction.
Hmm.
And a lot of people do like that. I would say that it's awesome and fun
I love
to go
it.
through that intellectual process of figuring out some new world.
Yes, and when I was reading this book, because one thing that doesn't usually translate is names, and we do have the
Mm-hmm.
way people pronounce their names. Um, Based on that information, I believe the book is written so clearly, like despite the fact that there aren't pronouns in these ways that we're used to, the parameters of the worlds and peoples that we are given they're so strong that I would love to see a version of the book written or rewritten by David Peterson, who, for those who don't know, created the language of Dothraki and other fictional languages. He does conlangs for a living because you can get a sense of what the languages should sound like from the way the novel is written.
That's the
It
best part.
it's so good. It's so interesting. And I have so many feelings about it. I could talk about it all day, but I knew of all my friends, you were the one I had to talk to about this book because I knew you'd get excited about the linguistic minutia with me.
There's so much happening, and I haven't even read a single sentence of it. And also, you've just said so many smart things that are unrelated. Like you were like book summaries, and I was like, yeah, let's talk about that. They're never good. um
Yeah, go for it.
no, but that's not relevant to this. This is way more interesting. I was just like, Jillian, you're right, you're so smart, you agree with me because well, that was
Because
going to
you're
be a
smart.
very, yeah, I was going to say that that was going to be a very self-aggrandizing sentence. You agree with me because you're smart and I'm smart. Everyone's smart. I was going to ask though, I'll do this one. Do they talk about the etymology of ancillary at all?
They don't really because, and this is where it sort of gets into that detail I was telling you about, that sense of reading a translation. Bless you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Ancillary is our word. I don't know what it
Yes.
would be in their language, but it's just what it is. Like there's the ship, there's the body of the ship, which, as what is considered a non-human species, they're honorific when you address them as ship. You'd say
Mm-hmm.
ship, what is blah blah blah, and it could give you information. but it's just an ancillary body to the main body of the ship.
Yes. So precisely. Um, I know that you're talking about the like minutia of the language in the book, but in our language, the old Latin ankyla means female slave. And so to have like
Interesting.
to have like the kind of servitude aspect, and b like a gendered like, and I'm not a classics professor, I am but a humble English professor, but I'm pretty sure there isn't a male equivalent, or service is the word for a male slave, but it's not the same word. And
Yeah.
so I'm thinking of like just like the interesting potential choice of, I imagine the author in the English speaking world who wrote this might have thought about what word to use. And ancillary is a good word for a million reasons, and it has gone through a bazillion shifts. Like it. We don't live in ancient Rome anymore, and as other language scholars will know, like you can interpret words differently over different time periods, and then they get turned into something else. But like, I just thought that was really interesting as a choice when you could have found a different English word for like this. Or I feel like I'm not really well versed in philosophy, but there've got to be philosophy words for this kind of thing. So yeah, it's interesting to me.
That is really fascinating. While you were talking, I was looking up the author Ann Leckie because I thought to myself, oh, she must be aware, right? Like she must know a lot about language. She must be a linguist and then struck out. She got her degree in music. So I
Oh,
think,
that's not surprising. If the
yeah,
melodies are important, that's awesome.
yeah. And yeah, she's worked as a receptionist, a waitress, a land surveyor, a lunch lady, and a recording engineer. But it appears that linguistics seems to be just a hobby of hers, an area of interest. And so even though she doesn't have like it appears the formal education in linguistics, I bet she would know that history of ancillary
Yeah.
and its word.
And many creative writers, even if they have a purely self-taught background, I think you would agree, any other creative writer would agree, like choosing names is like such a process when you're writing a story of any kind. And like it was always funny when I was in high school and had like babynames.com was bookmarked all the
Oh
time. And
yeah.
it's like, why? Or the jokes of creative writers being like, my search history would make people really afraid for my mental health.
Yes.
And like I was just writing a sword fight because I write fantasy, and I was like, how to stab to kill people. And then I was like, no, but it's, I promise I'm writing a sword fighting scene. Like I'm not a murderer. And like, so I
Sometimes
feel
I just
like
in my Google search history, I'll just type in FBI, this is for a book, and press enter just in
ah,
case someone's looking for it.
that's so great. I know, but like a murderer would say that, wouldn't they,
Yeah.
Jillian? No, but so I think that, and then of course, even if she didn't know or intended at all, like that's the beauty of being a reader. And that's what I always tell my students. And my students, when they're insecure, they'll always like start a really brilliant comment. They'll be like, maybe this is reaching a little bit, but like I was thinking this. And I'm like, it's not like, even if the author never thought that at all, you're not reaching, you're providing an interpretation that is meaningful and intelligent, and like, let's do it. So so much good stuff, Jill.
Yes.
So much.
So there's like so much more I want to talk about with this book, but also I want to hear all about your book. And what I want to know is, as you were reading it, like what really stood out to you? What were some of your favorite moments? And also, like, what were some of your least favorite moments?
Yes. So I'll do least favorite first because it's easy and also important. Content warning that the book contains obviously some homophobia, and it also contains some research and discussion and like narrative storytelling about violence against trans people. And so that's like obviously least favorites, in that that is not pleasant to read, and that nobody um, would feel comfortable and happy to read something so awful. Yes.
Just as a reminder for our listeners, please check doesthedogdie.com or get the app Does the Dog Die to look into any books if you have triggers, to look into any books for our recommendations because I don't know that I will know what all the triggers are to tell you about, but it's definitely important if things trigger you or worsen your mental health in any way to be proactive. And, even if a book sounds really good that we recommend it here, if you can't read it, that's not a problem. Just know going in. Please
I've
continue.
never heard of this website, but the name of the website alone makes me love it. And I'm sure, well, I guess maybe the listeners don't know, but as a person who reads for a living, like I have to manage my own like trigger content. Like an English professor can't really just be like, I'm gonna never read books about blank. So
Hmm.
like it's not something I am doing in terms of checking for triggers for myself, but I do try when I read a book with students to come up with big ones for them. So this website is very cool and I'm happy to know it exists.
Yes, and just so you know, they have basically any trigger you can imagine. You can enter details on triggers if you've read a book, and I highly recommend it. So, doesthedogdiet.com, A plus.
Thank you, Jill. So uh the the cool part about, again, the author is a writer, and she spends a lot of time writing for I think it's Miss Magazine, like writing for feminist magazines and freelance feminist work. And she's writing about like menstruation in different countries, and she's writing about like all of these things. And she does, research specifically on and I can pull up her name. I know her first name is Gwen, a young trans teen named Gwen, who, trigger warning, uh, was killed for her gender identity, basically,
Mm,
and was like a teenager who
mm,
was so vibrant and wonderful. And like this terrible story is a part of the author, Daisy Hernandez. It's like part of her story as well, that she did research on this young woman and like spoke to Gwen's family and like had to process through. And the author herself is cisgender, but is bisexual and had a trans man as a boyfriend for a long time, and like feels deeply connected to all members of the LGBT community. And that becomes a big part of like her being a writer, is also about empathizing and learning and caring and activism, and like trying to explain the importance of identity and gender to people. And so that's my least favorite, just in that it's difficult, but obviously it's important to talk about, especially nowadays, to read and discuss, and to humanize. Like, I spoke to this young woman's parents, and I like really viewed this person as a person who could have had such a great life, and that's really tragic. But I think my favorite part is just the quality of the writing itself. She uses like extended metaphors that kind of come through and then disappear and then come back, and it's very poetic in that way. And then also, the story isn't strictly chronological, um, which I am not dissing at all, but I think that a lot of memoirs are uh, so much like, I was born in Phoenix in this
mm.
year, and then I went to elementary school, and then I did this. And like, there's nothing wrong with that. But to me, as a creative writer and reader of many things, I'm like, I am interested in the way she kind of thematically organizes her memoir. It feels very organic in that okay, like here are different points in my life where I thought about my father's religion. Here are different points in my life where I had a different relationship with Spanish that grew and changed into something new. And so it feels very much like you are deep inside of her heart and her brain as she is kind of thinking organically and almost not stream of consciousness in the literal definition of that, but in the kind of popular like understanding of just like flowing through ideas. And so it's just I wish I had like highlighted some examples, but I was just having such a good time reading it.
That's
I guess
okay.
the other thing is that I haven't mentioned is that she uses both English and Spanish in the book. Sometimes she translates the Spanish and sometimes she does not. And I think for non-Spanish speaking readers, which I am really one of, I know a little Spanish, but not much. And we talk about this in creative writing or in English reading literature as like the kind of disorientation of if you are only an English speaker and you read this book and then there's untranslated Spanish, you feel disoriented. And a lot of uh, people who are not minoritized per se, maybe someone who is like, you know, a white English speaker, native born citizen of the US and is reading this, is probably not used to feeling marginalized by language or not used to feeling like they're not included because if you're the majority you are usually included. And so I think that that's something I see in a lot of specifically like bilingual writing of being like, well, you are a reader and now you are feeling one millionth of the disorientation that I felt when the author is she learns English as a small child and very well and almost easily because children are, you know, they're sponges. But of those first, she writes about like those first years in elementary school of just she says something like, I sat down in the classroom and the teacher started talking like the TV. And I was like, oh my gosh, like what a genius. If your parents speak Spanish all the time at home and you only hear English on the TV, like your teacher is speaking like the TV. And you're
Yeah.
just, she's waiting for the moment where the teacher starts talking like her parents and it never
Oh my
happens.
gosh.
And just that that feeling is something I have never felt obviously as a child. But you know, if you've been fortunate enough to go to a country that speaks another language than you, it's a lot.
It's very disorienting.
It's very disorienting. And also you know, especially today in this economy, many people don't have the opportunity to go and understand what it's like to be in a world or country or city that doesn't speak to you
Yes.
per
And
se.
actually, I have something to say about that because last time you were on, we had a brief discussion about feeling discomfort and knowing when it can be productive to push through
Yes.
and reach somewhere else. I would say, especially in language, this is another one of those times. I don't speak great Spanish, and I think that what I'm about to say really does apply to all languages, but I have seen it the most with Spanish that I don't know any native English speakers who think they're good at Spanish. And that is funny because I know speakers at many different levels of Spanish speaking
Mm-hmm.
who are all native English speakers. I don't think I'm very good at all, but I once casually used donde in a sentence, trying to find where a friend who I was meeting at the movies was, and they said, I don't know what that is. What are you saying to me? And so, and then I know people who I would consider basically fluent, and then they can't always get their words fast enough, and they're like, I'm so bad at Spanish. I'm like, you're way better than me.
Right.
So I think that when you are approaching that disorientation, know that it is a common feeling, and B, something that you grow through repeatedly over the course of interacting with a language. There's no shame in not knowing a language. It's always okay to look stuff up and take your time and to feel like it's a little bit bigger than you. Some
Mm-hmm.
people are really gifted at language and can just pick them up and know them, but that's not most people.
Yeah.
So I would say this is an area of discomfort for most people to work through that is really rewarding in the payoff.
Yeah, and I agree. So super tiny sidebar about bar, like I'm a Minnesotan. About me is like in Phoenix, and you're from Scottsdale, it's kind of similar area.
Mhm,
Uh, many people speak Spanish.
mhm,
I don't know, 30-40% at least, probably more.
mhm. And way
And
more in Tucson.
in Tucson, yeah, where we went to college. And so when I was in middle school, it was a requirement that all middle schoolers took Spanish. And I was very shy and had social anxiety. And half of my class spoke Spanish natively.
Oh
And then
no.
I'm learning this language that, like, I can't roll my R's. I don't know anything. And I felt so embarrassed, I guess, especially because I'm very good at school and I had encountered something I was not good at. And so what
It's
I did
very
was
rare. For those who don't know Miranda, she's very good at all things.
oh, thanks. I mean, I'm not very good at drawing. That's one. I'm terrible at directions.
Me too.
I've got
Me too.
yeah, but I I dealt with this by I guess plowing through, and I know like some small amount of mostly vocab words from doing language in middle school. I got to high school and I'm a nerd, so like just the fact that they offered Latin was cool.
Mhm.
But another big appeal was like Latin is not a language you have to speak out loud. You don't have to take oral exams or listening exams in Latin. And so I was like, sign me up. I'm there. And I have a lot of gratitude for my past like dumbly motivated self for doing this because I ended up studying classics in college and it became really useful as an English professor. But like there is another version of this where Latin did not serve me at all and it's like why do I know this thing? And then there's also the huge embarrassing irony now that I'm marrying someone whose first language is Spanish, and I had an opportunity to learn Spanish. My brother and my sister took Spanish from middle school all the way through senior year, and they're both essentially like fluent in the way that we would probably say like proficient. Like
Yeah.
you don't necessarily speak like a native speaker, but you can have a conversation without thinking very hard in this other language. My sister lived in Argentina for like almost a year. My brother studied abroad in Spain. They're like Spanish, Spanish, Spanish. And I'm like, oh, well, you can speak to Jeshua's parents, but I can't. And this is, so I'm always trying to practice a little bit. But I guess what I'm saying is I agree with Jillian that being embarrassed or disoriented by a foreign language is no reason not to learn it. And more English speakers should learn other languages, whatever those languages are that you choose to learn. And I wish that I had a language I spoke instead of two that I read for no reason.
I totally vibe with that.
Yeah.
Um, I really like this. I always love talking to you because the conversation goes places I wouldn't expect.
Yeah.
Um, some of I'll go to my books now. Some of my least favorite parts, because I'll start with those just because there aren't very many.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are some parts that dragged. There, it's a very sweeping narrative with very high stakes. And so there were times I was like, why are we here focusing on this one small place? Like, why is this where the story is? I will say, for the most part, those things bore out, and I was glad we were there, but there was a small sense of frustration that I wanted more and bigger and sweeping, and it didn't always give that. I would say this is not an easy read for everyone. So, one of my favorite things when I get a book that I really love is to essentially be a toddler about it and show everyone that I love
Yeah.
this thing and be like, read this, it's so good. But I couldn't do that. Like, I couldn't give this to my mom. I couldn't give this to a lot of people because the use of language and the just very challenging concepts.
Hmm.
They're for people who are down to
Yeah,
get in the mud with them, essentially. And I'd say the only other thing that was my least favorite, not that I disliked it, but it was my least favorite, is there were some subplots that I wish were given more detail. Not that they weren't fleshed out, because they were. It was more that, like, I wanted more information about them. I feel like they could have grown and expanded into their own novels or chapters or whatever. And I get why they weren't, because it's such a sweeping book anyway. You can't focus on everything. But some aspects of identity I would have really liked explored, especially for our main character. Um,
sure.
and then between least favorite and most favorite, I have like a specific thing, which is neurodivergency coding. And like, I feel like as someone with ADHD, I really liked the way it was normalized, but I can also see someone really disliking the portrayal of a mind that is divergent as essentially non-human,
I
or at least
see.
a source of debate. But for me, ships, AIs, ancillaries all felt very autism coded. There was deep wells of emotion and love within them that they had difficulty expressing to others, and also had difficulty understanding and interpreting others without concrete data. And that seems to align with a lot of what my autistic friends and family has expressed to me about autism, even if you are, quote, high functioning, even though I know that's a term some people disagree with. Like, I understand it's a complex issue. This seemed to really show the internal elements of a mind like that in a way that is very understandable and helps explain what those blockages are in ways that I don't think many traditional stories have done. So I really liked it, but I can definitely understand if it's someone's least favorite part of the book, or if they
Yeah.
completely disagree with this interpretation. Um, as for my favorite things, oh boy. Um, all the things we've already talked about, how thought-provoking it is, that it remained intimate despite this epic scale, the surprising and unique way of storytelling, and some standout moments for me is that the conflict isn't what you'd expect. It's not, let's take down this empire or let's topple this tyrant. That's not possible. She's way too powerful. She's way too many. She's just too many. Like, that's not a realistic goal. It's not Star Wars down with I don't know, I don't watch Star Wars, but the Empire?
The Empire, yeah.
It's not quite that. It's a more specific goal, and you don't really get fully what that goal is until the end of the last book, and that's okay because the stakes are so magnificent and compelling that it doesn't really matter. Um, I really love how well they delivered on the soap opera or the space opera. It
Sounds like, yeah.
it's so sweeping, and I was still wondering where that element of performance was. Because I've seen, like, what is it, Fifth Element, and like
Sure.
I know that some people might consider Battlestar a space opera, and
Star Wars is a space opera.
yeah, and so like I get the general concept of it, but this, as something that is primarily print media,
Hmm.
was something I didn't really expect to pull off this well, and it was so good. Um, and again, all the songs, very brief. I'm sorry, you're gonna hear my singing voice if you don't like it, but like a really good example is there's a nursery rhyme that the main character catches herself singing to herself, or more often, people notice her singing to herself, that is a perfect encapsulation of the space opera nature, of the language nature, of all of these things, because it is sung to her by a child of a colonized territory. And it's clearly like it doesn't rhyme. It's not as it would have sounded in its original language. You can just tell. But it's captivating and it sort of becomes bigger and bigger and bigger just emotionally as you hear it throughout the series. And it really captures like that building power of a space opera to me.
It's like a Bear McCreary.
Yeah, it feels very much like that, but it's so small. It's which is why I feel comfortable singing it. It's like really small. It's just my heart is a fish swimming in the water green, in the green, in the green. That's it.
Also, audience, Jillian has a beautiful
Oh,
singing voice.
thanks.
I'm not just saying that because you just heard it, but like I know this as a fact. Jillian is a wonderful performer and actor and singer.
Oh,
Um, and I loved your song. And I also love it as like even just if it was in print as like a work of poetry that it's like Sappho,
yeah.
you know? When
Yeah,
you
it's like
read
you get a
Sappho,
fragment.
yeah, you're like you got a piece of this and like something is missing and it sounds kind of weird, but it's the most beautiful thing you've ever heard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it becomes like an earworm. And like
Yeah.
you get the sense of actual opera like that I look for personally in a space opera. And if you've seen Fifth Element, there's like a singing alien in that sings actual opera in that space opera.
Hmm.
And like because of the way music is incorporated into the story, it's not that there are big sweeping musical numbers, but you know like that suffocating feeling of like a I mean you don't. I know you hate musicals, but go with me on this. But when
Okay.
there's a story that you really like and it's told in a musical formula, there gets to a point where the tension of the music is so high that it mirrors the tension in your chest.
Sure.
And I that's I think what I look for in a space opera, something that's doing that in the storytelling or in the music as I'm feeling that while reading. And this really delivered on that for me because there is a point when the people who are very annoyed by her singing to herself all the time notice and become very worried when she's not singing to herself.
Oh.
And so that the ebb and flow into when she is and isn't singing and how that is influenced by her surroundings becomes part of the story in itself. And it does the work of a musical without being a musical.
Absolutely. And I think you're just nailing what a good space opera does because it is about you use this like it's so sweeping and I was like yeah that's the definition they nailed it like the idea of like expansive interplanetary multi-plot like and this is my hot take I'm not saying this is the academic take that everyone has but like the Victorian multi-plot novel and like or and an early 19th century melodrama is like very parallel in
Mhm.
my experience to a space opera of like we've got this story over here and this thing over there and this person that you see one time and then you've got like this yeah deep emotional overwhelming feeling like as a core important element of the story like
Yeah.
I think that it sounds like you had a great space opera experience and
It
I'm
was
so
so
happy about
good.
it.
For someone who had no expectations or even idea of how it would work, I was so pleasantly surprised by how it worked. Other things I really liked what were the intense philosophical questions. Like I would be reading or listening because I was listening to this book and then realize I had to pause and go back 5 minutes because I was thinking so hard about the questions it was presenting to me. Like if you have many bodies and some of your minds disagree with each other, are you still one entity? Is it possible or ethical for us as someone without a body like that to even make that decision for someone else? Or is that a different thing? And at what point is someone a cyborg rather than an entirely different and new entity? Like I was just so captivated. It made my brain go buzz in that way that I
Mm.
like.
Can
Um,
I ask how old this novel is? Because I haven't heard of it.
Let me look that up.
I mean, also there's like almost infinite books in the world. I'm not saying I've heard of them
No, I
all.
know. I totally get it. So it looks like the first one was published in 2012, and the last of the series was published in 2015. But there have been other books, not in that series, but in that world, written as recently as 2023. I
Cool.
definitely, personally, really want another book in this series. I don't know if it'll happen because it did end kind of well, but I want more. It feels like it could live on because everything felt so three-dimensional. Um, and then the two much smaller, less philosophical, big brain things that I just loved the most about this book were two things. Bitchy ships.
Ha!
These completely flat-toned ships being absolute butt heads to each other brought me so much joy. It was I couldn't replicate it and I wouldn't want to spoil it, but I my mom has caught me like just cackling out loud because an unexpected ship spat has occurred. Delightful. And also, final favorite thing that I will fit into this episode, although there are many things, aliens with indecipherable identities and senses of self. Because as complex and boundary pushing as the human and non-human species and figures within this book are, the aliens, which are not considered non-human, they're considered significant non-human species, have just the most hilariously complex dynamics that no one even tries to explain. And it puts like our petty human, like, what is gender? What is sex? Like, it pales in comparison. It's one of those things that makes you not worry about it so much in the novel itself, is because there's this other thing. There is an alien species that they don't normally speak. They had to engineer a version of themselves within a species that could function as a translator between their own species and humans. And they think of themselves sort of as a collective identity, but they're much more independent than, say, the tyrant would be or a ship would be. Like we would think of them as completely independent someones, and they wouldn't consider themselves someones, to the point where someone gets off a ship and says, "Hi, my name is blah blah blah," and we have just had a character of that name and description die on
Oh.
a station. And so our main character goes, "Oh, I don't think you are. I think you're actually blah blah blah." And the person goes, "Are you sure?" "Oh, well, thank goodness. I really didn't want to be blah blah blah." I just didn't know what to do. It's so good. It just makes you feel that not only the world is bigger than our world, but like our I within ourselves is bigger
Hmm.
than you think of. I don't know. It just I really enjoyed it.
No, it sounds amazing, and I am intrigued and fascinated. And again, I could just ask you all about it because I want to know, but the better answer would be for me to go
Yeah,
read
you
it.
should read it.
Um, Rats, I was going to say something smart. Now I forget what it was, but I've said many things, so
You
I'm
say
sure
many
it's
smart
okay.
things all the time. Feel
Oh,
free to
thanks.
shout it out if you remember. So as we come to a close, first of all, what would you rate your book out of 10?
Yes, so this book I do give a 10 out of 10.
Nice.
Um, I find rating, as I told you before, like it's like so hard because like I think I rated my like kind of uh easily accessible romance novel last time, and I was like, yeah, I mean, it was like 9 out of 10. It was like amazing, and it's true, right? But
Yeah.
this book is a different kind of amazing. So,
Reminder for the scale we use, which is what did you want out of the book? Did you get that
mhm.
out of the book? About a 10 out of 10 experience of the book. It's not about an
Yes.
objective measure of literature because that doesn't exist.
Perfect then, because yes, I went on Google looking for a sort of multilingual, multicultural experience of being a woman and being a writer, and I found all of that and more, and I learned a lot and felt a lot of feelings and admired a lot and found like, you know, when you're reading like poetry and you hear like a really beautiful line and you just
Mhm.
like want to like hang it up on your wall or something. It was
Yeah,
like that, but it's prose, and I think that's really fantastic. So really,
excellent.
really good. And the book is not as long as most of the books I usually read. It's fairly short. So if you've got less time than perhaps a space opera, I think the book is 184 pages.
That's
So
awesome. And again, for our listeners who may not have taken note at the beginning but have been convinced by your summaries, please once again say the name of the book and the author.
yes, it is A Cup of Water Under My Bed by Daisy Hernandez.
Excellent. Well, once again, my book was the Imperial Radch series by Ann Leckie, and the main novels within that series are Ancillary Justice, Ancillary Sword, and Ancillary Mercy. For me, overall, I would rate it a 9.5 out of 10. I'd say the only reason that there's a half a point off is just because of the parts that dragged a little and because there were certain elements that I personally wanted fleshed out more that left me a little frustrated that I don't think are flaws of the book, but did diminish my personal enjoyment just a little bit of the book.
Fair, fair, fair.
Um, and finally, what are you reading next?
Oh man, oh man. I am in the middle of I gotta get the series name right. It's a very popular sort of dark fantasy series right now. The first book is called Belladonna, and the second book uh of Rats is what I'm reading right now, but I read so many books that sometimes I forget what their titles are.
Same.
Is that embarrassing? I
No, I
don't
do the
know.
same thing. I write it down before the podcast because I know otherwise I will absolutely forget.
Okay, so the one I'm almost done with right now, the title is Foxglove, and that's the second book in the
I've
series.
heard of
Um,
this.
yes, the author is Adeline Grace, and here's my pitch, and maybe I'll do it the next time I'm on the show, but
Sure.
these book series are a a supernatural dark romance. But they are also like proper gothic novels. And I'm just so into it. Like the sort of I don't think it's our world. It has a different name. It's not like, you know, England or whatever, but it's like 19th century English British aristocracy and ghosts and spirits and like the
Awesome.
author clearly has read a lot of like history to make this really historically interesting, and so that's what I'm reading at the moment, and maybe we'll talk about in the future.
Ooh, I'm very excited about that. What I'm reading and what I will be reading. So there are a couple more books in this universe that aren't the same characters, but are the same world and like one short story. So there's Translation State, which is I think the most recent one. Provenance, and a short story called She Commands Me and I Obey, which I think might be about the tyrant, so I'm pretty excited about, but I don't know. But the book that I am currently fascinated with and am in the middle of is called Doomsday Book,
Mm.
which this Miranda's an expert on British history, but like a very specific era of British history, so I
Yes,
don't
very
know.
specific time period.
Yes, so this is probably far earlier than you would know about, but do you know about the Domesday Book by William the Conqueror and his knights?
No, but it sounds really cool.
So Domesday Book off it's not, but Domesday
Okay.
Book is often mistranslated as Doomsday Book, and it's essentially a collection of tax records and basically how William was able to tax places after he just torched through England on his conquest.
Such a letdown when you said the name, it sounded awesome.
Yeah, well, it's called, I mean, they call it the Doomsday Book because of a lot of reasons, but one of them is that he laid so many places in the north to waste that they
Mm-hmm.
were recorded in the Doomsday Book or the Domesday Book as wasta or wasted, which meant completely shoved out all the people who were living there, destroyed their ability to produce crops. It laid them to waste. And that is actually why there is still some prejudice about like the backwardness of Northern England because they were behind for many years. The generational wealth was wiped out. They were replaced by like there's a lot that happened and they were frowned on. So this book isn't about that, but is named for that. And it is set in what was once the distant future. It was written in 1993, but it's set in the 2050s. And it's at a history department in Oxford, and they're about to, they have time travel. They've used it for historians many times, but mostly to go back to the 20th century or, explore things that are relatively known. This is the first time they're sending someone back to the Middle Ages.
Ooh.
And as there is issues happening in the past where they send this person, in the parallel present, there is a pandemic.
Whoa.
And it's so up my alley. I love time travel. If I could use time travel, it would be as a historian. It wouldn't be like that another kind of magical whimsy for me personally. I
It
just want to
wouldn't be an
see
Outlander
stuff.
experience to find your Scottish spouse.
I wouldn't be opposed. But it would not be my goal, but I would
Okay.
be up for it. But I just so badly want to know how what we know of the past compares to the actual experience of that past.
You're speaking my to my heart.
Yes, exactly. So, yes, I'm very into that book, and we might talk about that next time, but I'm having a very good time.
Yay.
Yay. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and I am so thrilled to have you on this podcast and as my friend, and we will see you next time.
See you next time.